warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, Tristan Freeman. He does absolutely incredible work over at Bustin' Brackets. We're going to be joined by him to take a little bit of a look at one of the teams that we're going to be seeing on Monday, and Robert Morris, as he's based out there in the city of Pittsburgh. So certainly going to be diving in quite a bit on what we've seen in the ACC thus far this season. Some of the teams have been surprising to the positive and the negative, and I'm going to pose to him this question as well. What do we make out of some of these teams that have taken a few losses but have played a greater strength of schedule versus some of these teams that they're really beating up on the weaker teams, and then in those step-up games, they're having a little bit of a tough time. Pittsburgh certainly has been one of them, so we're going to be diving into that topic with Tristan in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we had a fun day of basketball on Sunday. Let's take a look back at it. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
A lot of people are going to lead off with the Memphis win and the Colorado win, but how about if we look at a team that's now 8-2 against the spread? St. Joe's, they are not average Joes. They take down Princeton 74-70. This was Princeton's first loss of the season, but this is a legit Princeton team. I mean, they took down Rutgers, they took down Hofstra on the road, they took down Duquesne on the road, so I mean, this is a for real team. And for Princeton, they shot it well from 3, 16 of 38 from distance, while St. Joe's was just 7-26, but where St. Joe's won this game, they took care of the ball. 14 turnovers for Princeton, just 8 for St. Joe's. Eric Reynolds was able to lead the way with 21 big points. Team did a nice job rebounding by committee, winning that rebound battle by a count of 32-30. And for Princeton, even though they were able to shoot it well from the outside, on the inside, they went just 10 of 17. Meanwhile, for St. Joe's, they were able to do all of their work inside as they were able to go a grand total of 20 of 33 from 2-point range. And also for Princeton, 2 of 6 at the free throw line. You have to make those free throws when you get those opportunities, and I have to take an opportunity to highlight the fact that Iowa State has been able to cover these really big numbers this season as well. They were laying about 27.5 against Prairie View, and it was no match. I mean, they could have been laying 50 in this one because they won 107-56. Iowa State, 9 of 15 from 3-point range. Prairie View, 29 turnovers to 19 made field goals. Now, Iowa State also had 25 turnovers in this game. This was a sloppy Joe's game as Keshawn Gilbert, about 20 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds, 8 turnovers. Not a line that you see very often, but he had 22 points off the bench from Curtis Jones as well. And for Prairie View, they just were unable to put the ball in the basket. They shot 33% from the floor, so a quality win there. And how about a quality win for Colorado? They just completely pound the tar out of Miami by kind of 90-63. As for Colorado, they've actually been dealing with a few of their younger players, dealing with just a little bit of injury, and you had 20 big points out of KJ Simpson, the other main holdover from a season ago, Tristan da Silva. He very nearly went for a triple-double, 22 points, 10 boards, 9 assists. Now, the issue that you did have with Colorado in this game was the 15 turnovers, but Miami, they turned the ball over 20 times in this one. And for Miami, they go only about 45% from the floor. Colorado was really able to control the tempo in this game, and thus Colorado at Barclays Center, they get an absolutely massive win for them. Speaking of absolutely massive wins, how about what Memphis was able to do on the road against Texas A&M? They very nearly let this one slide away, but 81-75, Memphis was really taking control in the second half. You saw Texas A&M make a little bit of a run late, but David Jones, 29 big points for Memphis as they go 9 of 22 from 3-point range. Now, Memphis did have 16 turnovers in this game, but they redeemed themselves by winning the rebound battle 37-35. They're without Jordan Brown right now, but absolutely no problem for Jones, who was able to give the team 7 rebounds. And then Javon Quinterly, 24 points, 5 assists, 1 turnover. Very, very efficient play. Now, credit where credit is due for Texas A&M. Manny Obaseki off the bench at 21 points. And as a matter of fact, for Texas A&M, 41 of their points did come from off the bench. They were able to do a nice job of mixing and matching. But Memphis, they get the job done. A very big win for them. And this was a massive win for the Big West as well. Long Beach State, they go on the road and they win outright in the return / the debut of Bronny James, 84-79. USC loses outright as 14.5-point underdogs, and USC now 1-2 straight up against the Big West at home thus far this season, and it gets worse because USC had a double-figure lead in the first half in this one. As a matter of fact, they led by as many as 16 points, and then that lead went straight down the toilet bowl for Bronny James, by the way. Just a very good story in general, the fact that he's back out there on the floor. Played 17 minutes. He had 4 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, no turnovers. Wasn't necessarily a just banner day in terms of the stat line, but it was a banner day just for health in general, for him being able to get out there, and you love to see that story, but you also love to see Long Beach State be able to get it done, despite the fact that they shoot about 42% from the floor. They won the turnover battle by kind of 19-18, but they were unable to pull away with a lot of facets of this game, except for the fact that Marcus Siones, he was just hot. 28 points. The gentleman who began his career over at Washington goes 3 of 6 from three-point range. An absolutely mammoth performance from Long Beach State. And how about a streak staying afloat as well? Iowa has now scored at least 75 points in 26 straight games at home. Michigan gets the job done outright by kind of 90-80, but there was legitimately a fear that this streak was going to be going by the wayside, as for Iowa, they were at just 60 points with about 3:23 remaining. As a matter of fact, for Iowa, they were sitting at about 44 points with 11:38 remaining in the game. And for Iowa, they only went 5 of 20 from three-point range, but there was a lot of late-game fouling in this one. As for Michigan, they were able to hit their free throws, 23 of 20 at the charity stripe. Every single one of their starters were able to reach double figures, with Olivia Campbell being able to chip in there 12 points, 10 rebounds. Very big for a Michigan team in which they had fallen to 4-5 after they were looking like one of the darlings of college basketball through 2 weeks. Tulsa was looking like one of your hot teams to start out the season as well. They began the season, I believe, 5-2 against the spread, but Oklahoma State, wire to wire, completely controlled this game, 72-57. For Tulsa, they go 3 of 20 from three-point range, and Oklahoma State, who's had their struggles, they had Small come up big. How about Javon Small with 18 points, 6 boards, goes 2 of 5 from three-point range, and Oklahoma State wins this game despite the fact that they had 28 turnovers, 23 made field goals. Tulsa, they themselves had 20 turnovers in this game, but the difference for Oklahoma State, they win the rebound battle 41-23 to be able to get that in. And we always talk about movie flops. Well, if Michigan State was movie, they'd be the Adventures of Pluto Nash. I mean, my goodness, they're now 4-5. Nebraska gets it done 77-70. As for Michigan State, their three-point shooting was back in this one. 8 of 17 from three-point range. They were a top 5 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage a year ago. They entered quite cold from the outside entering into this one. Malik Hall gives you 22 points, but for Michigan State, defense failed them. As for Nebraska, they go 10 of 23 from three-point range. You had 20 big points out of Juwan Gary, and it wasn't a big scoring performance for Rink Mass, but he had 14 rebounds, 6 assists. Absolutely love what he was able to bring to the table for this Nebraska team. And for Nebraska, just 9 turnovers in this game as well. So they were able to get that one in. You also saw Boston College in the state of New York take down St. John's 86-80. Boston College all of a sudden looking pretty darn legit right now. As for BC, they hold St. John's to shooting just 4 of 19 from three-point range. Now, to the credit of St. John's, they win the turnover battle 13-8, but Quinton Post, he was big in the post, and he was 1 assist away from the triple-double. 14 points, 11 boards, 9 assists. Just another great effort out of Boston College, who all of a sudden is 8-3, and they have been quite solid thus far this season. So you absolutely do love to see that. And when it comes to teams that you might be wanting to fade a little bit more right now, Grambling has certainly been towards the top of the list. Now, I'm doing this podcast a little bit in advance with Washington State. They were laying about 24.5 points, so whether or not they get there, it's a little bit of a question mark. But going into their game against Washington State, Grambling was 0-6 against the spread. Only other team that entered into Sunday without a cover, Georgia Southern, is currently 0-9 against the spread. That has been not great, to say the least, for them thus far this season, but it has also been not so great for old Detroit. And for Detroit, they had a chance to be able to get a cover against Northwestern, and they were unable to do so. Northwestern, 91-59. They completely pull away, as Detroit was down about 10 points with about a minute remaining in the first half. They were catching 23.5, and then things just went down the toilet bowl for them in the second half as Northwestern, they go 10 of 24 from three-point range, and off the bench, you saw Nick Martinelli go 10 of 12 from the floor, 22 big points. Detroit loses a turnover battle, 13-7. They lose a rebound battle, 36-32 as well. So utter domination from Northwestern, and another team that's been relatively rough at being able to get you some money and being able to cover the spread. How about our good friends over there at Charleston, who have been just 3-6 against the spread? And of course, I make my DK network right up the under in this game, and the benches go completely berserk. And Charleston, they look to be getting back online. They get the win, they get the cover over Rhode Island by kind of 85-70. For Rhode Island, they go 9 of 23 from 3, and Charleston 10 of 23 from three-point range. Again, both benches went 12 of 22 from three-point range. That's just not something you can anticipate. It was a little bit more up-tempo than I was expecting as well. So that's something that I do need to work on in this Rhode Island team. Even though they play slow, they're not necessarily terrific on defense, to say the least. And the man that was able to get it done for Charleston in this one, Ben Burnham, 23 points, 5 rebounds. Charleston, they win that rebound battle by kind of 38-31. They win the turnover battle 17-11, and Rhode Island looks like they're in for another rough season. They were able to have Jaden House give you 12 points, but you also had 5 turnovers and went 1 of 4 from three-point range. So another less than terrific effort there, but you also were able to see a relatively solid effort in the AM from Fordham. How about Fordham taking it to North Texas, 60-59, and a low-scoring slobber knocker? As for Fordham, they were trying to overcome the fact that they had lost to NJIT just days ago, and they were able to do so. Not really anyone that was massive for this Fordham team. It was just very balanced in general. 6 different guys had at least 8 points, and the only guy that was able to get to 10 was Antrell Charlton, who was able to chip in there 10 points. For North Texas, you did have Aaron Scott chip in there 10 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 blocks. So it was very chippy down low. It was a very physical game, but in the end, Fordham, they were able to get that one done. And then in the battle for the state of Rhode Island, you did see Providence win and cover against Brown, 74-54. As that's a team that has been a nice fade thus far this season. Brown has been rough, to say the least, in terms of their defense. They allow Providence to shoot a little bit over 50% from the floor. For Providence, they actually lose the turnover battle 18-16, but they win on the glass 36-26. You saw 17 big points out of Bryce Hopkins along 7 boards. So another rough one for a Brown team that I do think is going to be able to turn it around. The question becomes when. And right now what we're taking a look at in college basketball is some of these trends. And right now, it's a little bit all over the place because we saw a lot of overs begin the season, we saw a lot of favorites begin the year, and then we saw a nice run on home underdogs. Really nothing standing out over the last 7 days. Last 7 days, 125 unders, 123 overs, and 2 pushes. Home underdogs are 30-29 against the spread. Favorites are 121, 126, and 3 against the spread. So some pretty milquetoast numbers there. Overs overall for the season, still doing quite well. 786 overs to 746 unders, so that's a 51.3% hit rate to the over. Home underdogs, 177, 174, and 6 against the spread, while favorites overall hitting about a 50.4% clip against the spread. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Sunday. Now let's turn it forward to a little bit of Monday's action. Let's also take a look at what we all got this weekend with regards to some prizes, and let's take a look at the lay of the land in the ACC with Tristan Freeman, who does tremendous work over at Boston Brackets. He joins me next right here on Gonzaga Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Dickinson Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back to lovely Las Vegas for Gonzaga Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Visa Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, as Tristan Freeman. He does a tremendous job over at Boston Brackets. Taking a look at this game that we all know and love. I know he worked so hard this offseason to get set for the upcoming season, and right now, a lot of what he was talking about has come to fruition. He does an amazing job as well of taking a look at all the teams out there in the Pittsburgh/Pennsylvania area. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X over at HoopsNut351 all together. And Tristan, It's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me once again, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Tristan. And Tristan, it has been an absolutely wild run to start the season, and I'm not sure how you take a look at things in college basketball right now, but I feel like darn near every team except for Arizona has had some sort of a clunker performance this year. Arizona has just been completely bulletproof to this point, and I do think that they are worthy of being the number one team as of right now. But how do you take a look at the college basketball landscape? Because when we take a look at teams having an off shooting night, something like that, we always see it as an outlier. And like I said, Saints, Arizona, I feel like every team has had to deal with that, which makes it increasingly difficult to evaluate where these teams are right now.
We see a tier starting to emerge. I would say it's probably like a good 8 or 9 teams that sort of separate themselves as legitimate title contenders. Obviously, the unbeaten teams like Arizona, Houston, and Baylor are in the mix, but then Kansas and Purdue, who is in the Maui Invitational, Marquette as well, the reigning champs UConn to the mix. I mean, I think those teams have sort of separated themselves as legit title contenders, where even if they would lose a couple of games here or there, I wouldn't be as worried. Others are going to have to go on their own run to sort of impress me of sorts.
Yep, I do think so as well. And I'm so glad that you brought up Houston, because with Houston, it certainly has been a case where they haven't battled necessarily the world's greatest competition, though I will make the argument that that win over Utah, it's looking better and better by the day. But how do you take a look at a team like Houston, who they have really been beating up on teams by 30-plus points? But I mean, other than really that game against Houston, and I'll give a little bit of love to Dayton as well, they're still a little bit, shall we say, unproven as of right now, whereas a team like a Kansas that has taken a loss, a team like a Marquette who's taken a loss or two, these teams, they do have an L or two in that column, but at the same time, they have played against better competition.
Yeah, I think we've all just going to be waiting for a Big 12 play for Houston. I mean, their schedule isn't elite in the non-con, but since they're not in the American, they don't have to schedule like a Gonzaga normally does. So they've played enough decent teams where they can build their own resume in the eventual fight for a top seed in the Big Dance. But we're just going to have to wait until they get up against the likes of Kansas and Baylor to see how good Houston is. But, you know, any Kelvin Sampson-led team is going to be there. They have the guard play with Shed and Damian Dunn and the others, so I'm not worried about them one bit. But you do want to know, like, are they definite title contenders or just a team that could be ranked in the top 10 once again, but could have another early exit?
Going to be really interesting to take a look at this Houston team in your number one in the Big 12, a Big 12 that is once again locked and loaded, as Tristan Freeman, who does absolutely tremendous work over at Bustin' Brackets, is joining me on Coast Soups, and it does look like, once again, you've got the Big 12 that is reigning supreme in all of college basketball, but I do want to get your thoughts on the ACC just because you do get an up-close and in-person look at Pittsburgh, and I just fear that we're in the same boat once again with the ACC, because I've actually really liked what I've seen out of the top teams. I know that Duke has had a couple wobbles, but all in all, they still look pretty solid. You've got a North Carolina team that honestly has done a little bit better than expected, and heck, Virginia right now looking like a really good defensive team, but it does feel like the bottom of the conference with the likes of Louisville and company is once again going to be letting this conference down, and I do have massive question marks, and I'd be remiss not to mention that Clemson has looked very, very good as well.
Yeah, if you take Louisville and Notre Dame out of conversation, you just hope that bubble teams don't lose to them this time around. They don't have a great top, because if North Carolina is the best team in the rankings and they're probably going to be the only team in the top 15, assuming Miami takes a drop, it's not great because I think people are still not sure about Hubert Davis, but it's still a league with potential. I mean, Boston College on Sunday beat St. John's. You have Florida State, who's capable of beating a team like Colorado, although they didn't follow up with Stetson. And we ultimately still don't know about teams like Virginia Tech, NC State, Wake Forest, now that they have Efton Reed and should be getting Monsanto back. Pittsburgh, who's shown flashes but also can be vulnerable. It's just still ultimately going to be a lot of unknowns. And I think the league did okay in the non-con, but not necessarily great. The good news for them is that outside of the Big 12, I think there's questions for all the other leagues and their respective middle of the leagues. We'll have to wait till January to see who starts to separate themselves. But I think no one outside of, again, Louisville, Notre Dame, can you definitely say is a bad team. And that's progress in its own right.
Yep, it certainly is. With Georgia Tech, it looked like it might be a little bit of a rough year for them after that loss to UMass Lowell, which, by the way, UMass Lowell actually a pretty solid team thus far this season, but rebounding with that win over Mississippi State, I thought was absolutely massive for the conference. You mentioned it, Boston College, who has been one of those bottom teams the last few seasons. Them being able to rise up is good. Still not sure about Florida State, but they've got a win over Colorado. The loss that they took to South Florida, a little bit ghastly on Saturday, but it does feel like at the very minimum, the ACC is picking up some of these quality wins, since what we're seeing out of Louisville. And, hey, they even had an opportunity against Texas as well. So that has been very important to note. And I know that you do a great job of covering Pittsburgh, and it is one of the things that just myself from a betting perspective tries to quantify this time of year, because I feel like Pittsburgh is a team that really fits this mold. With Pittsburgh, they've got some pretty good metrics right now, because I'm sure that you noticed as well as I did when they went up against the likes of Jacksonville, when they went up against the likes of North Carolina A&T. They completely dump trucked them, winning by like 25-plus points. They looked really solid, but I think that you'd agree with me that when we've seen Pittsburgh in these step-up games, even against a team like a Missouri, they have fallen a little bit short. What do you make out of a team like a Pittsburgh that on paper they've got relatively good stats, but when they've played against better competition, they just have not been up for the challenge?
Yeah, I think there are some pieces for Pitt that played better than preseason expectations. I think Ishmael Leggett has been a really good transfer find from Rhode Island. Blake Hinson is now a 20-point-per-game consistent scorer at that, and he's someone that could compete for ACC Player of the Year. And, of course, the freshman Bub Carrington has been really good, and his play alone, I think, is going to determine how good Pittsburgh can be. But some of the other pieces just hasn't been great. Federico had a great first year filling in for John Hughley, but he struggled. The Diaz-Graham brothers sort of have their ups and downs. And then Zach Austin, a transfer from High Point, his minutes is getting cut, and there's a chance that he's going to lose his starting job to Will Jeffress. Pittsburgh needs to get their depth sorted out in terms of guys who can score, because you don't want to be in a situation where you need Hinson to go for 30 to have a shot. But they do have the kind of offense that can beat just about anyone, and they were still competitive against a Clemson team that you could make the case is currently the best team in the ACC. Assuming that they get through Purdue, Fort Wayne, and South Carolina State, we'll have to wait to see how they look against a team like North Carolina in open league play. But as we saw a year ago, that can be the start of a nice run for the Panthers.
Yeah, but if they lose to South Carolina State, I think you want to be packing up the tent for an NCAA tournament bid. That would not be too terrific, to say the least, but I think that that's so well set on Clemson as well. And I do want to get your thoughts on Clemson before we dive into some of the teams that we're going to be seeing on Monday, because Clemson has been one of the biggest surprises to me. We saw them on Saturday really have their coldest shooting performance of the year against TCU. They still did a nice job of holding it down on the glass, and I think that this is a team with some real potential, not just to be able to perhaps win the ACC, but to be able to wreck some shop nationally, as I feel like this is the most balanced team that Brad Burnell has really ever had.
We knew P.J. Hall was going to be an all-ACC player. Chase Hunter was going to be great, and Joe Girard was going to be a nice double-digit scorer for them. The question was going to be, what was they going to do at the 4 spot, replacing Hunter Tyson? And Ian Shefflin has had an underrated, very good start to the year. He's a double-digit scorer, a really good rebounder, and an underrated passer as well. When you have someone that can pass like him with all those available shooters, that can just make this offense really potent. And they're winning all the games that they're supposed to. They haven't screwed up yet, and all you can do is just be impressed with what they have. People will still remember last year after their great start to the year before they floundered. But I think this team is better equipped to withstand those issues and be not only a tournament team, but one that could potentially do some damage in March.
Yep, absolutely. I really love what I'm seeing out of this Clemson team. My biggest question mark for them coming into the weekend was how would they respond on a little bit of a cold shooting day. They had a little bit of a cold shooting day against CSU, and they responded really, really well. So that certainly stood out to me from the weekend. As Tristan Freeman, who does amazing work over at Boston Brackets, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly you do a great job of covering the Pittsburgh area teams. But I know that in the Pittsburgh area, you've got a team that is currently struggling, and they're going to be in action on Monday. That'd be Robert Morris. They're going to be playing us to Delaware, and they are going to be a home underdog in this spot. But I do want to get your thoughts on this Robert Morris team, because one thing that stood out to me in researching this game is that each of the top 4 scorers for Robert Morris have missed at least one game. They're all now back in fold, and maybe I'm just being naive. Maybe I'm just buying into some of the hype that I had around Robert Morris going into the season, but I do think that Robert Morris has a golden opportunity on Monday to pick up a big win against a Delaware team that has really struggled on defense.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, though, there's also a Delaware team coming off a big upset win over Xavier. So they're very capable of beating a mid-major like Robert Morris. The Colonials, they're just very inconsistent. They only got 4 real scorers. That starter, Jackson Last, can't give them anything offensively. TJ Rainwright's had a great sophomore year so far, but outside of Marquise Hastings and Josh Corbin when he's making shots, they're relying on Justice Williams, the LSU transfer, to give them consistent scoring, and he just hasn't been able to do that. RMU is very capable of scoring points. They also are capable of staying in because in the first half against Youngstown State, Northern Kentucky, they was right in there, but then things just fall apart. They have to prove that they can be good to stay in it for 40 minutes. They just haven't shown that yet. And if they don't start doing that, then they're going to lose a lot of games this year.
Yeah, it certainly has been a rough start to the season for Robert Morris. And I think hurting them as well moving forward is that I feel like the Rising League is just so much better this year than it was a season ago. Wright State certainly is not playing any defense, but this team on offense has been pretty solid. UW Green Bay was just a skid mark on the underpants of college basketball the last few seasons. They've been able to rise up a little bit more as well. I take a look down the line even at a team like in Northern Kentucky, even though they've been a little bit inconsistent. I like what I'm seeing there. And overall, I just take a look at this Horizon League, and I do think that it's going to be tough for Robert Morris, especially when you have to play against teams like Cleveland State and company to be able to pick up wins. And I think that this would be a very impactful game for them moving into conference play in a few weeks.
Yeah, and then looking at the rest of their schedule, they also have Cornell, who's a talented team out of the Ivy League, to have to deal with before league play. And look, if you just replace Green Bay with Detroit, you still have your 2 bottom feeders in the league with them and IUPUI. You have teams like Milwaukee and Cleveland State dealing with some injuries because Milwaukee's best player still hasn't been playing for a while. But the rest of the teams, as you mentioned, are really good and capable. There's a lot of scoring depth, and that's been something that RMU has been missing. Again, there's going to be a lot of losses in the mix if they can't get that. And by the way, this is also a team that just can't beat IUPUI consistently for some reason. It wouldn't be surprised if they struggle with them for a 3rd year in a row.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. I just have no idea of how to explain it because IUPUI has been a team I've made plenty of money betting against this far this season, but in conference play, they were actually quite solid last year, and you just always seem to have Robert Morris's number. I just can't explain it as something that I can explain is that this man does a terrific job covering college basketball. Tristan Freeman joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Tristan, when you take a look at the landscape of college basketball, I was talking about it a little bit before when we started our conversation. It feels like every team has had an outlier or 2 performance thus far this season, and thus it causes for a lot of questions in college basketball. Is there a team or 2 that you're going to be watching for going into Christmas, really the next week, even the next 2 weeks, that you just want to see a little bit more from because maybe you're on the fence of whether the team can be able to ascend on the national landscape or not, but you're still a little bit jury's out on them? Where are a few teams that you're watching for these next 2 weeks that have a few questions that you want to answer?
Going back to the ACC, Florida State's one of them because they're a team that showed that they can actually win against a team like Colorado, but they've also been inconsistent at times. Like Leonard Hamilton doesn't have 2 bad years in a row, so I'm curious if they can get things going. And then the team that's going to have a completely new roster soon is West Virginia. They're going to have Kirk Kriisa back from suspension. Cook is getting back into the fold after having his heart condition. And who knows? I mean, the NCAA reportedly is looking back into the Raekwon Battle stuff, I think likely because they don't want to deal with the lawsuit. But there's a chance that they're going to get him back as well. If you can get that before a Big 12 play, then they can all of a sudden become, a sneaky, dangerous team. They have Massachusetts, Toledo, Ohio State left in the non-con. They're going to have to win those games if they want to have any chance to get back into the bubble conversation. But then ultimately, it'll come down to how they look in the Big 12 play. And I am curious, once Kirk Kriisa comes back, how much better can their offense look, or is it still going to be shaky?
Yep, I think that's a big question as well. And then I do want to throw at you one more because we saw this game go down on Sunday, and we saw Memphis go on the road, take down Texas A&M. how do you feel about Memphis right now and their potential upside? Because my biggest question with Memphis coming into the season was whether or not all these talented pieces would gel. We knew that it was going to be a new look team. We knew that there was going to be some growing pains, but I feel like they're a little bit further along than what I expected. And I think Memphis showed on Sunday that if they can just be able to get the chemistry down, and I feel like they're a little bit further along than I was anticipating coming into the year, that this team on the national landscape can also be incredibly dangerous.
The most important thing for them is that they know who to go to guy. That's Davy Jones, the transfer from St. John's, averaging over 20 points a game. He's been fantastic for them. Quinnipiac's been a good point guard for them. And they don't have big man Jordan Brown, but he hasn't been overly great for them. And assuming, the reports and rumors are true that he's not going to return to them, they still got Nick Jourdain and Malcolm Dandridge inside. So they still got enough front court depth. The AAC isn't very good overall, so we'll have to see what they do in the next couple of weeks. They have a matchup with Virginia, and that's going to be really interesting to see. As you said, has the team gelled and come along together enough to go up against a defense that gives everyone fits?
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see what they can do in the last few weeks of non-conference play, going into conference play. And we've got ourselves a lot of fun to take a look at the next few weeks before Christmas. And then we strap up for what is going to be a tremendous few months of conference play. And Tristan, I know you're here for it. I know that you're doing an absolutely amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yes, sir. You can follow me at Hoopsnut351 on Twitter/X. You can also follow at Bustin' Brackets. And even though the schedule is going to get a little quieter in the next few days, we'll be having various power rankings on the leagues 1 month in, and then previewing what's going to be probably the best Saturday slate of the season coming up.
Yeah, but it is going to be an absolutely tremendous slate, and Tristan, he does a great job of being able to cover it all every single time he joins this podcast. He lends absolutely amazing insight. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me on Cuts Against Soups, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. It's always great to be joined by Tristan Freeman. He does amazing work over at Bustin' Brackets, taking a look at this game of basketball that we all know and love. He's out there in the great state of Pennsylvania, but he does a great job covering all 362 D1 teams. Every single time he joins this podcast, lends great insights, much like he did today. So a big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNR_D1. Today we've got 3 games on the normal Las Vegas betting board before extra games, which involves the Southland, it involves the Northeast Conference, the America East, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Southland. Those are the games that are at the bottom. Any games not involving those conferences, those are going to be up top. And it begins with 881, 882 on the betting board. Yale hits the road face-off against Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac is a road favorite of 7 points, and your total is between 146.5 and 147. I did say Yale as a 6.5 point favorite, so here at the 7, I'm going to be willing to take a look at the points. With Yale, this was very much a defense-oriented team a season ago, and it's the complete opposite this year. Yale, in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, a relatively middle-of-the-road team. I feel like they've been a little bit better on the offensive side of things, especially from the outside, but in terms of their defense, they went from being a top 35 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis to now being 223rd, and yet they're being valued higher than they did last season, which I do find to be a little bit extreme. Now, you take a look at this Quinnipiac bunch, and certainly they aren't what they were on defense a season ago. Season ago, it sounded like they were amazing on defense, but they certainly weren't 219th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. But I do think that Matt Blahnic is going to be able to play a big role in this game and be able to keep Quinnipiac in it, shooting 39.5% from 3, 17 points per contest, going up against a Yale team that has been able to find that main rebounder. Danny Wolf has been able to give you 8.5 rebounds per game Last season, it was just sort of a piecemeal effort with a bunch of guys just sort of grabbing boards, and you still sort of have that outside of Danny Wolf, as you've got Matt Noling, who's been able to give you 11.5 points, 4.5 boards, dealt with a little bit of injury, missed a pair of games, but now is back in the fold. Nick Townsend has been able to give you about 4 or so rebounds per game as well, and for Yale, to their credit, they're doing a nice job not turning the ball over. 9.5 times per contest is how many times they are turning it over. Meanwhile, Quinnipiac, 13 turnovers per game, but with this Quinnipiac team as well, they are shooting 36% from three-point range. You've been able to get some good versatility out of Rihad Varvis. Hopefully I said that correctly. The gentleman from Latvia has been able to shoot about 40% from three-point range. Began the beginning part of the season a little bit banged up, starting to get more and more minutes. He's starting to do a nice job for this team. You've also got a Quinnipiac bunch at their top 7 scorers. All but one of them do give you at least 4 rebounds per game, with that lone exception being Savion Lewis, who's giving out 7.9 assists per game. That is a top 3 mark in all of college basketball. With Quinnipiac, they do get a little bit loose with it, but I do think that they've got the best facilitator in this game. That's no disrespect to Baz Embeg, who's been able to do a solid job for the Yale team as well in terms of not turning it over, but I feel like you get a little bit more explosiveness out of this Quinnipiac team, and I do think that for Yale, they are going to look themselves in the mirror and try to be able to hunker down a little bit more on defense. Their defensive slide has been partially because they have played a really rough schedule. Yale's still not playing up-tempo. They're about 257th in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, Quinnipiac more around 85th. I do think that this game gets tied down a little bit, but Quinnipiac with Blahnic along with Lewis in the backcourt hold in there. Willing to take 7 or more with Quinnipiac, set my total at 144.5. So looking at the under and 7+ points with Quinnipiac. Now we get to my DK Network write-up pick. This is 883, 884 on the board. It is Delaware. They had thrown to face off against Robert Morris. Robert Morris is anywhere between a 5.5 to a 6-point home underdog. Throws between 146.5 and 147.5. Talked about Robert Morris a little bit earlier with Tristan Freeman, and I do think that Robert Morris has a good chance for this game to be a rubber stamp for them. I like them outright on the money line. Now, when this article comes out, it'll probably be before money lines are available, so the write-up will be officially taking 5.5/6 points, whatever the number is when it is published. That is what I'm going to be willing to take, but I think that Robert Morris is able to get it done against a Delaware team that has really hit the skids in terms of their defense. 74+ points allowed in each of their last 4 games after they got off to a really nice start on defense. 68 points or fewer surrender in each of their first 5 games. But the reason why the defense was so good to begin the season is that you face off against Brown, Delaware State, Air Force, a non-D1 school, and Bucknell. So they really saw things go downward with regards to the increase in competition. Now, for Delaware, they've got a really solid rebounder in Christian Ray, who's been able to give you 8.5 points, 8.5 boards. I like what he's able to bring to the table. And for Delaware, they've done a nice job taking care of the ball. Only about 10.5 turnovers per game. They face off against a Robert Morris team that has been a little bit sloppy with it. 14 turnovers per game out of them, but they've been able to do a better job of turning the ball over fewer times on a per possession basis in their last 3 games. And a big reason why is because it's something I laid out a little bit before. Each of your top 4 scorers for Robert Morris have missed at least 1 game this year, so they've been a little bit of a turnstile. Now that you've got Josh Corbin back in the fold after he missed 3 games, now that you've got TJ Wainwright back after he dealt with a little bit of an off-the-court absence to begin the season, I do think that things are going to rise up for a Robert Morris team that also shooting only about 28.5% from three-point range. They go up against a Delaware team that's more like 160th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, so I do think that that'll be a nice stick-up, and I think that Robert Morris can win this battle down low with what Marquise Hastings has brought to the table. Was at Western Michigan last season where he was logging about 8.5 points, 9.5 boards, really didn't have a lot of range. He popped threes, but he was shooting about 20% for 3. He's actually become their best three-point shooter at 39%. He's got really good versatility. I think that that's going to be a hard guard for a Delaware team that does have a little bit of a jack-of-all-trades in Jelon Trent of their own. He comes over from the Summit League over at North Dakota, 11 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists per contest, and then Jair Davis has been able to rise up as their main scorer with 18 points per game, but Davis has never been a great three-point shooter. Shooting 28% from distance this year, is a career 25% three-point shooter. Robert Morris, they're a team that they like to get physical in terms of fouls on a per-possession basis, right around 285th, and they go up against a Delaware team that their kryptonite on offense has been at the free throw line, shooting about 66% at the charity stripe, bottom 70 in all of college basketball. I do think that Robert Morris is going to make this a physical game. I think that they're going to be able to force some turnovers. I think that Robert Morris busts through against a Delaware team that have to wonder if they're feeling a little bit fat and happy after their big win over Xavier, and it is a defense that, as I mentioned, has given up 80 plus in 3 out of their last 4 games. I do think that things are going to be bogged down just a little bit more. I did set my total at 143. Robert Morris, traditionally a little bit more of a slow and controlled team. Delaware outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game, and I do think that Delaware shooting about 37% from 3, see some regression there, so diving in on the under, my DK Network write-up pick, that is going to be officially taking the points with Robert Morris, and I personally am going to be taking a stab on them outright on the money line. 885, 886 is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. Utah Tech hits the road face-off against Cal State Northridge. CSUN is in a pick'em game, and total on this game is staying between 145 and 146, and with CSUN, I did set them as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. With CSUN, this team has really cranked up their tempo under Andy Newman, who was coaching over at Cal State Bernardino last season. He has really brought this team some tempo. They were outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game last season. Now they're in the top 60. It is a team that they get reckless with the ball. 15.7 turnovers per game, but you got Deshaun Ellen-Ikens, who's really done a nice job of being that main headline scorer with 21 points per contest on 40% three-point shooting to go along with 6.5 rebounds per game. This team doesn't necessarily have ideal size, but you've got a lot of guys that are able to hit the boards. Out of your top 6 scorers, you've got 5 of them grabbing at least 3.9 rebounds per game, and you've got your top 3 scorers and Ellen-Ikens along with Deontay Bostic, throwing their Keontae Jones, all generating at least a steal per contest as well. And then on the flip side, you've got a Utah Tech team that they have a tough time taking care of the ball. 15.3 turnovers per game. They don't force as many steals as the CSUN team does. So they do have one guy that's been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of being able to generate turnovers in David Elliott, but problem is, he's been missing the last 6 games. Does not look like he's going to be good to go in this one, so that means that Utah Tech becomes a little bit more one-dimensional. Utah Tech has been very good with regards to the three-point shooting about 38% from distance. Tanner Christensen, a 6'9", little bit of combo player, is giving you about 13 points, 7.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. You've been able to have Beion Riley come in and shoot, not even kidding here, 63% from three-point range, as he's a career 30% three-point shooter, so I think that that's going to be going downward a little bit. Other than Riley, Tanner Christensen, you really don't have a lot of rebounding on this Utah Tech team. It is a Utah Tech bunch that they play a little bit more up-tempo as well, so I do think that this is going to be a relatively up-and-down game, and in terms of both of these teams, they've actually been quite surprising with their defense. CSUN is a top 60 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Utah Tech more in the neighborhood about 154. So I do think that that's really interesting to take a look at. But I think in terms of just sheer possessions, you are going to be able to get a lot of scoring. And on top of that, both of these teams have really benefited from playing some lackluster competition. For the last 5 games for CSUN, they played a non-D1 foe, Northern Colorado, Pacific, Mississippi Valley State, and Lemoyne. Utah Tech had a tough game against Washington State, but Lindenwood, Utah Valley, Cal Baptist, and Idaho. That explains why these two teams have been so good with their defense. I do think that this comes down to late game felling, and I do think that you get an up and down game that involves a lot of scoring. Semi-total 155.5. Looking at the over, looking at CSUN on this pick'em line. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-595, 306-596. Texas A&M Commerce plays host to Northern Colorado. Pick'em game here across the board with a total of 143.5, and I set Commerce as a 2-point favorite. Texas A&M Commerce actually has a win on their resume against St. Joe's, which is just absolutely wild. And for Northern Colorado, they've had to turn St. Thomas into St. Do-It-All. 16.5 points, 9.5 boards, 3.8 assists per game, so he has certainly been able to deliver for this team, but that said, he's not getting a lot of help from his friends. The team overall is shooting about 31% from three-point range. He's the only guy giving you north of 5.1 rebounds per game. You've been able to get about 5 boards, 12 points per game out of Brock Wisney, so that's been a little bit of something. And you have Riley Abercrombie. He's been in college basketball for seemingly 500 years. There's no Fitch to go along with him, but at 6'9", he's been able to shoot for his career about 38% from three-point range, but as has been the case since really the dawn of time for Northern Colorado, this team has been absolutely putrid on defense. In terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, they're clocking in right around 182nd. It's a Commerce team that they're right around 300, so they've certainly had their issues, but with Commerce, you do have a little bit more in terms of a backcourt to rely upon. Alonzo Dodd, about 3 assists to 1.3 turnovers per game, to be able to get quite a bit out of a pair of guys I really do like as well in Jerome Brewer Jr. along Kalen Williams, combining for about 25.5 points per game. It is a Commerce team that they only shoot about 30% from three-point range, but they generate turnovers. Each of your top three scorers for the team are giving you at least a steal per contest. You've got a team that has quite a bit of depth. They're not afraid to go about 10 or so deep as well, and I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more moving forward out of Tommy Lewis, someone who was dealing with a little bit of an injury towards the beginning part of the season, but we've noticed ever since he has come back into the fold, the team has had a little bit more explosiveness in general, being able to bust through the 90-point plateau in 2 of the last 4 games that he has played in. So I do think that Texas A&M Commerce in a little bit of an early game, as this is going to be a 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific time game, that they're going to have a little bit of a leg up on a Northern Colorado team that they do have to travel a time zone for this one. It is a little bit of a funky spot. St. Thomas is the best player out there on the floor, but he just really doesn't have a lot of help. Meanwhile, you've got a Texas A&M Commerce team in which a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So this is a spot in which I am going to be taking a look at Commerce, set them as a 2-point favorite, and did set my total at 146. I do think that you get some late game fouling to push it over, and you got a Commerce team that's been relatively rough on defense. So looking at the over and looking at Commerce on this pick-em line, 306, 597, 306, 598. Fairleigh Dickinson is going to be playing us at Columbia, a 2.5 to a 3-point favorite, and your totals between 157.5 and 158.5. I made Fairleigh Dickinson a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take Fairleigh Dickinson outright on the money line. With Columbia, they have been able to do a nice job of being able to rise up a little bit this year, but I still have some massive question marks with them. I do like what Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa has been able to do in the backcourt. He's able to log about 13 points per game. He's been a solid 3-point shooter, but when it comes to this Columbia team as a whole, they certainly still have some holes with their defense. They've only got one guy pulling in north of 4 rebounds per game. That'd be player Thompson, who's got some nice versatility, 10 points, 6 boards, his 51% 3-point shooting. That is unsustainable. It's a team that turns the ball over 13 times per game, and I do think that going up against a very up-tempo Fairleigh Dickinson team might be a little bit difficult for them. Fairleigh Dickinson doesn't have a lot of size, so the fact that Columbia doesn't do a great job on the glass, that's an Achilles heel that will not be exploited. You've got so many guys from that team a season ago that were so solid. Ainsley Elmorner has really been your top scorer, 16 points, 5.5 boards. You got a team on Fairleigh Dickinson that has a lot of guys in general that throw it in there from 3-point range, even with having John Munden Jr. dealing with a little bit of an injury. You've had Joel Emmanuel really be able to step up, shooting 36% from 3-point range. He's logged 9+ points in 4 out of the last 5 games. Been able to get quite a bit of production as well out of Devontae Jamison. Jamison has come up from the non-D1 ranks. He's shooting about 36% from 3, and he's been able to run a pretty efficient team. 5.1 assists to about 2.3 turnovers per contest. It's not a Columbia team that's going to go out there and get a bunch of steals. Meanwhile, you got a Fairleigh Dickinson team that they are able to rifle the ball away. They've been able to generate 9 turnovers per contest for Columbia. The scoring has certainly been there for this team. They've been able to put in there at least 70 points in 4 of their last 5 games, with the defense starting to slip up a little bit as well. They give up 70+ points, so Lafayette team has won the slowest in all of college basketball. And for Fairleigh Dickinson, this team has been pretty much rocket ship with their offense. Sans that game that they had against Fordham about a week or two ago, this team has been able to get to 70+ on the regular all season long. So I do think that for Fairleigh Dickinson, they're going to be able to match the firepower that Columbia has in the backcourt with their own. With Columbia not necessarily having a ton down low, I think the Fairleigh Dickinson gets the job done on their home floor. I did set Columbia as a 5-point underdog, so looking at Fairleigh Dickinson outright on the money line, and I did set my total at 157. It's a Columbia team that I think is going to be playing their mid-tempo style. They're going to try to not get sped up too much by Fairleigh Dickinson, and I do think that for Columbia, they're going to see their 3-point shooting dry up a little bit. They've been shooting right around 35.5% from the outside, so diving in on the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at Fairleigh Dickinson outright on the money line. 306, 599, 306, 600. New Hampshire is going to be playing us to Stonehill, and Stonehill is an underdog of 14 points. Your total is between 150 and 150.5. Instead, New Hampshire is a 19.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. This is a Stonehill team that is a legit bottom 20 team in all of college basketball. They're 1-10. They have absolutely no rebounding whatsoever. As a matter of fact, they don't have a single guy with north of 4.4 rebounds per game, and that would be Pano Paladivius. He's been able to do a relatively okay job there, but they've also now been dealing with so many injuries. Jackson Biagini has been missing a little bit of time. He should be good to go in this one, as he was missing time a little bit earlier on during the season, but you're still waiting to see what you're going to be able to get out of Sean Odell moving forward, as he's been out the past 2 to 3 games. Looks like he's going to be out once again, and he's one of 4 guys right now that's averaging north of 6.5 points per game. So it really does leave you in a rough bind for a Stonehill team that's turned the ball over 13.5 times per game and is currently in the bottom 40 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, going up against a New Hampshire team that they do a nice job of being able to get about 8 steals per game. You've got a big 2 in Clarence O'Daniels along with Ahmad Robinson. These 2 guys been able to log about 35.5 points per game. Daniels is able to give you 8.5 boards, shooting 40% from 3-point range, and each of your top 5 scorers for New Hampshire, as a matter of fact, shooting at least 34.5% from 3-point range. Jackson Baker logging 6.5 rebounds at a block per game, makes this team tough down low, and unlike Stonehill, New Hampshire, they've done a very good job of taking care of the ball, only about 10.5 turnovers per game. Now, is New Hampshire an ideal defense? No, they're not, but at the same time, they've been able to do a nice job considering this was a very low and slow team a season ago. They were well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. They've cranked it up into the top 65, and they're still a top 200 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up about 10.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are at home rather than when they are on the road as well. So I like what I'm seeing there. I just think that this is going to be flat-out domination from a Stonehill team that they rely so much on. Max Zagorowski has been able to give you about 12.5 to 13 points per game. He's able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but for this Stonehill team, a lack of size, coupled with a team that really doesn't shoot it well from 3 with that lack of size, I think is going to be costly against a New Hampshire bunch that really has been able to do a nice job with their offense, and it's a New Hampshire team that's been able to do a relatively solid job of covering as well. I believe that they have now covered 3 out of their last 4 games, and for Stonehill, been very, very rough for them to be able to get to 70 points. Meanwhile, they've given up at least 79 in 4 out of their last 5 games. So it is a spot where I did said New Hampshire is a 19.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and made my total of 153.5. So here at the 150, looking at the over and willing to lay the big number with New Hampshire 306-601, 306-602. Penn, the Quakers are going to be playing us to Howard. Howard is a 4.5 to a 5-point underdog. Your total between 148 and 148.5. With Howard, I did set them as an underdog 6.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Penn. Penn coming off of a little bit of a rough one on Saturday against Kentucky, but I think there's going to be a lot of teams coming off of a rough one when they do play against Kentucky. And when it comes to this Penn team, they've done a really nice job of being able to score by committee without Jordan Dingle thus far this season. Clark Slagert has become a little bit more of your main man, logging about 19 points per game, but Nick Spinoso and his versatility has been tremendous. He's able to give you about 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game. It's a Penn team that is shooting as a collective 40.5% from 3-point range. Now, that should be ticking downward quite a bit, but still, this is a Howard team in which they've got their question marks with regards to being able to take care of the ball. It certainly is one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball, and that leads to more turnovers, but still need to be doing better than 16 turnovers per contest. Now, with Howard, you do have some nice headline scorers for the team, as you've had Shai Odom be able to step up. He's been able to give the team about 10 points per game. Seth Towns, who, he is very familiar with Ben because he spent the beginning part of his career, not even kidding, like 5 to 6 years ago over at Harvard. He's been absolutely incredible since coming off of injury, 18 points, 7.5 boards, shooting 47% from 3-point range as the Van Wilder in all of college basketball. But one thing that is certainly eluding Howard is just overall shooting defense, as in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, Howard, they have not really been able to do a great job of holding it down with that regard, as they are allowing opponents on the road to shoot 35.7% from 3. They've been a very good home 3-point shooting defense, but on the road, it's been an entirely different story. You've got a Penn bunch that they turn the ball over 12.5 times per contest, so that's going to be a little bit of an issue going up against a do-it-all player. Bryce Harris has been able to give you 16 points, 6.5 boards, but with Penn, they've done a nice job being able to find some ancillary pieces. They're able to kick it into high gear. They've been able to get a lot moving forward as well out of someone like a Sam Brown, who is out towards the beginning part of the season. He has come back after missing 4 games, 11 points on 49% 3-point shooting. You've got just so much more depth with this Penn team. Meanwhile, for Howard, it is a bunch that they're just going to give up points. You have to accept that. 80-plus points surrendered in 3 of their last 4 games. It's a Penn team that has been all over the place in terms of their offense, and their numbers are a little bit warped by the fact that they have played a few overtime sessions, so a very interesting spot to say the least. I did set my total at 152.5. I do think that you get an up-and-down game, so looking at the over end, want to lay up to 6 with Penn. 306-603, 306-604. South Carolina State plays us to Jacksonville. Jacksonville is a favorite of 4.5 points. Total's 147 to 147.5. Set Jacksonville as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this summer. It's been a rough year for the Jacksonville defense. They're outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Now they get a South Carolina State team that is in the bottom 75 nationally in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. Davion Everett has had to be the do-it-all player for this team. 1.7.5 rebounds per game. You've got one other player that's giving you north of 4.1 rebounds per game, and freshman Drayton Jones. This team was a relatively okay three-point shooting team a season ago. They lost all those pieces. Right now you've got one guy on the roster that's averaging more than 3 points per game that's shooting above 30% from three-point range. As a collective, they shoot 65% free throw line, 26.5% from three, with 15.5 turnovers per game. While Jacksonville certainly has some of their doldrums on offense, they're only shooting about 31% from three with 14 turnovers per game. They do have Robert McCray the fifth. He comes in from Wake Forest, 18.5 points, 3 assists per game. You've been able to have Josiah Powell be able to give you a pair of assists per contest, take a little bit of the edge off, and 3 assists per game out of Marcus Niblack as well, who's coming from the non-D1 ranks. He's done a nice job shooting about 43% from three-point range. It actually began his career over at ETSU as well. And then down low, you've got enough to be able to match up with Everett, with Bryce Workman being able to give you about 7 rebounds per game as well. It's a Jacksonville team that they do need to build themselves up once again on the defensive side of things, as it's been pretty lackluster. They have now given up 79 plus points in 3 of their last 4 games, but got a South Carolina State team that it's been even worse for them. 80 plus points surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games, all while scoring 71 points or fewer, and now 3 of those last 5 games. It's been very difficult for South Carolina to say the least, and I do think that Jacksonville going to be able to get back to their defensive roots. This is still not a Jacksonville team that is playing super duper up tempo for South Carolina State. They always do. They are currently 21st in the country. South Carolina State is in terms of total possessions per game. For Jacksonville, they're still right around mid-tempo, 172nd in the country with this regard. Last year they were playing at a pace of about 63 possessions per game, and I do think that they're going to try to calm this game down a little bit. I think that they're going to have success with it and get the job done with their backcourt. So I did set Jacksonville as a 7-point favorite. Could be willing to lay the number and made my total of 145. So going under and going with Jacksonville laying the number. 306-605, 306-606. Sam Hamford is going to be playing us at Alabama A&M. Alabama A&M is a 17.5 to an 18.5 point underdog, and your total is 153.5. And with Samford, I set them as a 23.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Alabama A&M. They are completely gutted from last year. Last year, they had much more down low. They were able to have someone like Messiah Jones be able to give you double figures. And really, the guy that has to do it all right now is Dalen Smith. And Dalen Smith has been solid for the team. 12.5 points, 4 boards. He's been able to do a nice job of being able to lead the way in terms of a few steals per game, as well as Caleb Blackwell has been able to help out a little bit on the defensive side of things as well. 2 steals, 3 assists per game, but he's only been able to give you about 9 points per contest. And other than Dalen Smith along with Omari Peak, you don't have a single guy in the roster that's giving you north of 6.4 points per game. This for a team that doesn't have a single player averaging at least 4 rebounds per game. That is absolutely terrible. Meanwhile, you've got a bunch on the flip side in Samford that certainly has been dealing with some injuries. They've been having guys in and out of the fold, but this team can really get it going in terms of being able to force some turnovers. It's an Alabama A&M team that's had all sorts of issues being able to take care of the ball. 14.5 turnovers per game. They really have no rhyme or reason with their offense right now. And for Samford, you've got guys that are able to bomb it from three-point range, along with a point guard in Rylan Jones, who, this guy was absolutely tremendous when he was at Utah. It feels like he's honestly gotten worse throughout his college basketball career, but now he's been much more efficient here at Samford. 4 assists, 1.3 turnovers per game while shooting 40% from three-point range. And for this bunch, you've got 4 of your top 5 guys shooting at least 40% from three-point range in terms of points per game. Now, they have to deal with an injury to Jermaine Marshall. He's a guy that's able to do a nice job with his versatility. 12 points, 4 boards, shooting north of 40% for 3. Figures to be out once again, but you've had Anchor be able to give you 7 rebounds per game down low to be able to help mitigate that. On top of that, you've been able to get right around 2 assists and a little bit of scoring as well out of Garrett Hicks, who began his career over at Alabama A&M. This team in Samford is able to generate a little bit over 11 steals per game, so they do a nice job of being able to turn their defense into offense. Got an Alabama A&M bunch that has scored fewer than 60 points in now 3 out of their last 4 games as well. Meanwhile, for Samford, they've been giving up their fair share of points, 71 plus in 3 of their last 4, but they've gotten to at least 79 in each out of the last 5, with Alabama A&M really having nothing down low, with them having a tough time taking care of the ball against the Samford team that generates these turnovers, and with this Alabama A&M team in the top 10 in the country in terms of fouls committed per game. I think that Samford is going to be able to dominate this game, so I did set Samford as a a favorite of more in the neighborhood of about 23.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And with regards to this total, set mine at a 159.5. I think that Samford does a tremendous job of turning defense into offense. So I'm going to be taking a look at Samford laying the number and taking a look at the over. 306.607, 306.608. Gonzaga plays those two Mississippi Valley State. Mississippi Valley State between a 39.5 and a 40.5 point underdog. Totals between 141 and 141.5. I did set Gonzaga as a 42.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Gonzaga. It's such a bad end to their game on Saturday where they scored just 3 points in the final 7+ minutes. I think that they're angry, and I think that they're going to take it out on a Mississippi Valley State team that has covered a few games because Raekwon Brown has honestly been a solid player. 15 points, 4.5 boards. For their standards, a really good three-point shooter at 31% from the outside. The reason why I say that is because Mississippi Valley State right now is shooting 60.5% at the free throw line with 16 turnovers on 27.5% three-point shooting. He's gotten a little bit of help with Donovan Sanders stepping up, being able to give the team 10 points, 2 assists per contest, and his 2 assists per game that currently leads the way. Nobody other than Brown is giving you north of 4 rebounds per game, and as a matter of fact, other than the 4 rebounds per game that you get out of Areco Gibson, these are the only 2 guys that are giving you north of 3 rebounds per game. Gonzaga is going to absolutely wreck them down low with Anton Watson and Graham Ike just being very versatile, having size with a combined 29 points, 16.5 boards. With Watson, he gives out about 2.3 assists per game, and both of these guys shooting 40+% from three-point range. This certainly isn't the Gonzaga team that you all know and love. Ryan Nembhard is not quite at the level that we've seen from like Jalen Suggs and guys like this in past years, as he has been turning the ball over about 3 times per contest, and he's currently shooting 21% from 3. We should see some positivity there, but I love what I've seen out of Braden Huff. Braden Huff as a true freshman, a little bit under the radar in my opinion, has been able to do a really nice job of being able to contribute 47.5% from three-point range. He has seen a lot of limits with regards to his minutes recently. I think that they're going to let him cook quite a bit more in this one, figuring that he is good to go, as I know that there's been a few injury reports out there, but even if he's out, I mean, something like a Dusty Stromer is just much better than what Mississippi Valley State is able to throw out there. I do think that Mississippi Valley State does their part with the total, and when I do their part with the total, I mean, get to right around about 50 or so points. That's all that they need to do now. That is actually quite a stretch for this team, as they have now scored 48 points or fewer in regulation in 4 of their last 5 games, and it's a Mississippi Valley State squad that they have yet to really break the 60-point plateau in regulation ever since the beginning of the season, as their game against Pacific went to overtime. That was like 57-57 going into overtime. So you do have your trepidations there, but I do think that Gonzaga are going to be able to light it up. We've seen them handle lesser competition, and they should be able to do so here. We'll lay up to 42 with Gonzaga, made by total 152.5. So looking over and looking Gonzaga, we wrap things up with 306.609, 306.610. San Francisco plays us in New Orleans, and New Orleans is an underdog of 19.5 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 145.5 and 146, and I did set San Francisco as an 18-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the 19 plus here with New Orleans. New Orleans is going to have a tremendous score out there that I think is going to be able to keep them lively, as Jordan Johnson has been absolutely amazing. He's been able to put in there north of 20 points per contest, not quite shooting the 48+% from three-point range like he did a season ago, but still, he's been able to do a nice job lighting it up from the outside. You're going to need to have some help for him, but he's been able to hold the ball with about 4.5 assists per game while still being able to shoot about 39% from three-point range. Javon Vincent has come on as a little bit of a rebounder with about 6 boards per game. Now, that's one place where New Orleans is going to get crushed. They don't have a lot of size, as you're going to be able to get good production out of Jonathan Mogbo. 15 points, 10 rebounds per contest for the San Francisco team that overall they do need to shape up with their turnovers. 13.5 turnovers per game was a bugaboo for them last season, but Mongolian Mike is able to give you 4 assists, 10 points per contest. Marcus Williams is able to give you about 15 points, and with San Francisco, they do a really nice job of taking away the ball. Each of your top 4 scorers have been able to generate at least a steal per game. Now, one issue that I do have with San Francisco is that they've got a lot of size. You've got Vladimir Murkowski, Isaiah Hawthorne, guys like this that aren't seeing a lot of minutes. I mean, heck, even a little bit more of a versatile guy in 6'8" Stefan Tordvik, who aren't giving you a lot of rebounding. Mogbo is the only guy on the roster that's been able to give you north of 4 rebounds per game. New Orleans certainly doesn't do a great job on the glass, and they're still going to lose that battle, but been able to get about 5 rebounds per game out of Deontay Bell, who's been able to step up a little bit more after he's been an afterthought last few years with this team. And it's a New Orleans team that, as a whole, has done a nice job of being able to shape up with regards to turnovers. Last year, they were one of the worst teams at taking care of the ball in all of college basketball. Now they're generating nearly 10 steals per game. They're only turning it over 12 times per contest, and I do think that because they do such a good job of being able to take care of the ball, that's going to allow them to be able to score some points, get this total over, and keep them in this game. I set my line at 18, so we'll take the points with New Orleans and the over, and that will wrap things up for the Monday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to throw those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And a big thanks to Tristan Freeman of Plus and Brackets for joining me in the last segment. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.